The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4176. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4176, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to early learning, the first engrossment.
There are amendments at the desk. If there are no objections, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on the amendment. The member from Ramsey, Representative Perez-Vega.
Thank you. Check, check, mic 1, 2. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of this amazing legislative body. I am here to present House File 4176, an early education policy bill. This bill does a number of adaptations to the early learning policy landscape in the wake of last session's significant investments in this area. Notably, I'd like to say that HF 4176 merges the voluntary pre-kindergarten VPK and school readiness plus programs for consistent program delivery in the mold of the VPK program, and makes changes to the merged programs, including splitting Minneapolis and St. Paul school districts in 2 separate regions to simplify the administration of the seat allocation process. Under current law, VPK seats are allocated to 4 regions, Minneapolis School District and St. Paul Public School District being together. The balance of the 7-county metro, Greater Minnesota, and all charters, based on each region's proportionate share of pre-K enrollment statewide. This does not affect seat allocations to any other region. This change simply makes administration of the program easier for Minneapolis Public Schools and St. Paul Public School Districts. This does not have a fiscal note. This requires VPK teachers to be licensed. It allows school districts to offer VPK on a sliding scale fee for service if a student does not otherwise qualify for a state-funded seat. I want to note that HF 4176 also changes the eligibility requirements for early learning scholarships and adds priority groups for the program, including students with IEPs, IFSPs, or prior chemical dependency treatment. And let's talk about how HF 4176 separates the definition of kindergarten and pre-kindergartners. As a mom of a pre-K student in the St. Paul Public School District, I see how successful our earliest learners in Minnesota have the capacity to seek their highest potential and being engaged once they turn into kindergarten. I just would like to say thank you for those that had supported this early ed in the previous session, in which we gained bipartisan on an unanimous vote for the HF 3785, and I'm staring at our early ed chaired Representative Dave Pinto, because we care about our earliest learners. We believe in early childhood education, and that's why I'm here to present HF 4176. I do understand that there are some amendments, Madam Speaker. Am I correct?
That is correct, Representative
Well,
Perez-Vega.
let's give them a hear.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
I urge a vote yes, not on those amendments.
Hudson moves to amend House File number 4176, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A5.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Perez-Vega, for being open to hearing our amendments today. These amendments, I hope, will be taken very much in the light of the type of work that we do in committee, where we're trying to illuminate each other's blind spots and point out ways in which the bill could be better. So the A5 amendment that we're going to start off with here today, it does 3 things, broadly speaking. The first thing it does is it would increase early learning scholarship age eligibility from age 5 to age 6. And the purpose for that is to expand opportunities for children and parents who are not yet ready to enroll their children in kindergarten. I have a personal example I'll come back to here momentarily. The second thing that it does is it increases the scholarship application prioritization from childbirth through age 3 to include children through age 4. And the purpose of that is to help maintain the original target population for these scholarships when it was first enacted in 2011, and enable them to fully bridge the gap into kindergarten. The third thing that the amendment does is it sets a uniform scholarship amount and repeals what we regard to be the parent-aware rating penalty. And I'll go into more detail regarding what I mean by that here momentarily. But what that would do is it would ensure that scholarship funding is fair for families and that the providers they prefer for their children are the ones that they have access to. So we'll go through these one by one. So increasing age eligibility from age 5 to age 6. Under the law, a child is potentially eligible for early learning scholarships if they are under the age of 5 as of September 1st, if that school year or of that school year and not yet enrolled in kindergarten. This amendment raises the age to 6 and not yet enrolled in kindergarten. And the idea behind this is that since kindergarten is voluntary, a parent should be allowed to continue receiving a scholarship for their 5-year-old if they choose not to enroll that child into kindergarten. And the current law forces 5-year-olds into kindergarten, provides a kind of an economic coercion when kindergarten is voluntary. Otherwise, the parent needs to find other financial resources to continue to care for the early learning opportunities for their child. Now, I spoke about a personal example earlier. My eldest son, he's 15 now, but quite a few years ago, he went through the pre-K screening, and I believe it was at the age of 4. And that was our first indication that he was on the autism spectrum, which was something that took us quite aback and certainly had a profound impact upon our pre-K planning for him. He had to undergo a number of services that were provided in consultation with the district. He continues to operate under an IEP, but it was a rousing success. Like, we were able to provide him with speech services and occupational therapy and all sorts of helps and services that got him where he needed to be to where he could keep up with the rest of his colleagues. But it did hold back him being in kindergarten at the age that he might have otherwise been. And we were fortunate in that we have family supports, people who came around us, namely his grandparents, who were willing to help us out with childcare issues. And so we were able to dodge a lot of these problems that these programs are erected in order to assist Minnesotans with. But if that hadn't been the case, if we had been proceeding under the situation that a lot of families do, which is they live here, but their family isn't here, their extended family isn't here, they don't have those kind of community supports to assist them, and they have to rely upon something like early learning scholarships, having that introduced into their calculation of it doesn't make sense for us to be sending our kid to kindergarten right now, but we kind of feel like we have to because our scholarship is gonna force us into doing so because it doesn't extend to age 6 is what we're trying to fix here with this amendment. The second thing the amendment does, again, increasing age 4 to age 5 for the prioritization of scholarship applicants. Under the law, the Commissioner of Education is required to prioritize applications for children under age 4, thus prioritizing scholarships for children from birth through age 3. This amendment raises that prioritization to include kids 4 years or younger, and the purpose is to set a dividing line between scholarships for children 3 and under while funneling children starting at age 4 into school-based programs. That's how we perceive this bill unamended impacting families, is that, it provides that kind of arbitrary cutoff that once you're 4 years old, we're gonna start shoving you towards the school system when that may in fact not be something that you're ready for. We believe that the decision to seek a school-based program should be made by the parents rather than through the coercive effects, intentional or unintentional, of the mechanics of state law. And the last thing that it does is, again, it sets a uniform scholarship amount and eliminates the parent-aware penalty. This is what we mean by that. So under current law, the Commissioner of Education is required to set tiered or differentiated scholarship levels in a variety of circumstances, including geographic location of the provider. So the Commissioner is also required to pay the minimum value of the scholarships to programs with a 4-star rating or a maximum value, I should say, under the parent-aware rating system. So basically what we're saying here is that different providers are getting paid differently based upon how they rank in the parent-aware system and also potentially where they're at geographically. This creates disparities. What this amendment does is it requires the commissioner to set the scholarship amount to either the same rate we pay for CCAP, which is that 75th percentile child care market rate, or the average of statewide general education revenue per pupil, whichever is greater. The amendment also eliminates the parent-aware penalty that I just described, preserving the financial incentive for providers to achieve a 4-star or other measure of provider quality recognized under Chapter 119B. Our position is in the minority that for too long, the fiscal policies of the state have undervalued family child care providers based not only on their program type and geography, but also their perceived quality. The services provided by family child care providers are just as valuable as those provided by child care centers and those in the suburbs and urban core of the Twin Cities. The parent-aware penalty has been used to undermine family child care providers in favor of school-based or corporate chain-based children centers. And I was struggling today to try to come up with an analogy that effectively conveys what this status quo with basing the subsidy off of the parent-aware system does. And I don't know if I achieved that with what I'm about to say, but it's the only thing that's come to mind so far. We're familiar with rating systems that are used as points of reference in commerce, whether you're talking about renting a hotel or going to a restaurant or whatever the case may be. And I don't think that any of us would ever consider attaching the amount of benefit that we give to something like a nutritional program to the rating that a restaurant or a grocery store or any sort of food vendor got on some rating app, right? We wouldn't say, well, it has to be the best of the best, otherwise we're not going to pay for it, or we're going to pay less than we would if you chose to go somewhere that gets rated less but is closer to you, or that you have some other reason to engage with because it's of value to you. And that's what we're trying to achieve here, is to open up the options for parents and families to really choose the providers that are best for their students in their judgment, regardless of what the parent-aware rating system says. That system should be used as a reference, as part of their value calculation into whether or not they should engage with these vendors, not a determination of how much money they're going to have available to them in order to provide this crucial service for their families. So with that, I would urge members to vote yes, and hopefully we can get there. Thank you.
Discussion on the Hudson Amendment. The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield to a question?
The author of the bill will yield for a question. Representative Quam.
My understanding is that any school or ISD would automatically get a 4-star rating. Is that correct interpretation of current way things are?
Representative Perez Vega.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No.
Representative Quam.
So can you explain to me the process that a school district would go through and required to go through to get a 4-star rating? Oh, Madam Speaker.
Representative Quam.
Would she yield for an additional question?
She will yield for an additional question. Representative Perez Vega.
I believe Representative Quam is getting mixed up here on the language of the 4-star. Yeah. And I'd like to keep the conversation based off on the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Quam.
No, actually, I was trying to have clarity because the citizens are watching. And all the information I've received is that a school that does the pre-K automatically qualifies as a 4-star. They have to show insurance and some stuff like that, but they do not have to go through the process, extensive process that in-home and centers have to do to be a 4-star. My issue is there are some school districts that have less than half of their students reading at grade level. And to me, that should be a 1-star at the most. And that frankly, quality should matter. If you've got something in here you're paying more for a 4-star, then we want to make sure that that's quality. This amendment is taking that away. And I agree with the amendment because there are, again, not all, but there are a few districts where less than half the students can read at grade level. And we should not have them, if they can't handle the students that they're currently getting, give them the support and everything they need to be able to achieve, then we should not burden them or allow them really to be taking young children where a big component of that is learning the basics. So I would support the amendment because, frankly, the bill and the current status of the system isn't taking into account quality or lack thereof in some of the pre-K situations. So I say vote green.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, and members. And I cannot resist a moment to speak a little bit about Parent Aware and the burden that that brings to some of our rural communities. I understand that this was created to have kind of a guide and a reference for our families so that they can know that this is quality family childcare or childcare center. What Representative Quam talked about, the disparities between a school-based VPK versus some of our other centers or family-based child cares, there is just kind of the assumption that if it's attached to a school, that they do automatically get that 4-star, and what Representative Quam talked about with them having our family child care providers having to go through quite an extensive process, such as lots of different professional development, lots of different training, making sure that there's a lot of money that is spent to go through that time. That whereas a school doesn't have to do that, that is something that we should address, number one. But on top of that, it already is quite an extensive list and extensive requirement in order to become licensed in the first place. And I don't know if anyone has been outside the metro area. Hopefully you have, because down in my rural area, when we are trying to decide which family child care provider or which provider that we are going to send our children to, that's done a lot through word of mouth. That's, hey, I got to talk to Susie down the street or to, Johnny down the road, who actually I'm quite pleased with the child care that I've received. And so having our parents be in a position that they have all that information, Parent Aware is more of a burden for my child care providers in the rural areas, because I have many people who have worked decades in the industry, have maintained a reputation of excellence, have actually been child care providers for children and their children, and you don't stay in business if parents aren't happy. You're not staying in business if you aren't passing the inspections and continuing your license. You're not staying in business for that. And yet this extra layer of Parent Aware where fine, but having it attached to any type of funding like this, where if I get a 1, then I, as a parent, I can't get any extra, reimbursement. It's simply unnecessary in the sense that we already have so many other measures that we can look at when it comes to quality of healthcare. Not only do they have to get some sort of license, which is itself difficult and should be, but we also have so many different ways that we should be looking at this. Rural and metro are not the same. I grew up in the Twin Cities, so I understand that there is lots of different choices and lots of different options. And maybe you don't know who's down the street, or maybe you don't know in that next town where you work who is going to be the quality child care provider. Maybe you don't know. I understand that. But in rural Minnesota, that is not the case. It is not the case that you don't know who is down the street from you, and you have talked to many of your friends at church, at your work, around in your neighborhood, and so you do know who has been providing quality childcare and consistent quality childcare. So members, I would urge you to vote green on the Hudson Amendment so that we could make sure that our parents have every option available and that we are understanding that there is quite a difference between the way that this parent-aware was intended and for what the unintended consequences are of it. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members, I urge a green vote.
Any further discussion? Representative Perez Vega.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to highlight, as a representative of the state of Minnesota, in which everyone is creating law in the district that I represent, that I have been appreciative to tour the great state in speaking on with early educators throughout, from the greater northern to the south. As a child myself, I actually was able to tour this great state and learn about all the different communities, from our indigenous communities to the settlers who became farmers. And I want to highlight that in the metropolitan area, those 4-star ratings are there because there is more training. There is more licenses that are going throughout those districts, but that doesn't belittle our early educators throughout the state. I want to also highlight that, Representative Hudson's amendment would bankrupt the program here. And in this session, we have been very clear that we are trying to not create negatives, but we are trying to stay in balance. And we are going to create balance furthering on these programs and how they have been agreed upon in our committees and voted upon in committee. So I would like to urge a vote no with a vota rojo on this one. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'm looking for the name. Scott, the member from Scott. Representative Bakeberg. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I honestly, I wasn't going to stand up and speak. I'm not an expert in early ed, but I just have to caution the body when we start making comparisons from metro to outstate, especially when we're talking about training of our professionals. And I'm hoping that's not what was intended, but what I just heard is that metro school districts should have a 4-star rating because the training is so great in the metro. I want everyone to think about that. So those of you that don't live within the metro, I could care less if you're a Republican or a Democrat. The teachers serving our kids, they are highly trained professionals wherever they live.
Any further discussion? Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the robust conversation around this amendment. I deeply appreciate the majority concern about exposing us to potential bankruptcy. Boy, I hope we can come back and circle to that concern when we discuss some other provisions, potentially once we get into some financing bills here later in the session. But just to clarify, it is in fact true under current law that school-based programs do receive an automatic 4-star parent-aware rating simply by signing a statement assuring us that, yes, we are in fact the best. We're awesome, and we promise to be awesome, so give us that rating that says we're awesome. That same privilege is not granted to private centers or certainly family-based childcare. And that's exactly the point that we're driving at here, is that as a legislature, we're putting our thumb on the scale to control the choices that are made available to parents in order to care for their children and provide for their early education. And our position in the minority is that that's not something we should be doing. We should be empowering parents to be able to make the choices that, in their judgment, using their full comprehensive knowledge of the specific needs of their student, which, we talk about that all the time, about the importance of diversifying our approach to each individual child to make sure that they're getting what they need. There is no greater expert on that for any given specific child than their parent. There just isn't. And so empowering them with the ability to take the benefits that we provide them and apply them in the way that comports with their judgment, I think, is rather invaluable. And that's why I would request a roll call vote, Madam Speaker.
A roll call has been requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you. And with that, I would just urge the membership to vote green. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Member, please vote. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Kern.
Curran votes no.
Kern votes no. Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 yeas and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hudson moves to amend House File Number 4176, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I hope to kind of reset the tone a little bit here with this second amendment. It's offered in a similar vein. We're trying to improve your bill. We're trying to make it more functional for the people of Minnesota, for Minnesota families. But given the trend that we seem to be seeing here so far this afternoon, I will request a roll call vote, Madam Speaker.
A roll call has been requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, a roll call, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, once again, very similarly to the First Amendment, this one does three things. What it does is it streamlines the voluntary pre-kindergarten program requirements to provide more flexibility at the school level while ensuring parental involvement in program coordination. So let me unpack that a little bit. What it does is it's going to strike the current and proposed changes to the VPK program requirements and uses instead the program requirements from the School Readiness Plus program. And this is going to streamline the program requirements, providing more local discretion in program design while maintaining the essential requirements around comprehensive assessments, comprehensive program content, including early literacy and language skills, and a clear direction to coordinate with parents and kindergarten teachers. The next thing that it's going to do is it's going to simplify the pre-K program child eligibility to align to the current criteria used for School Readiness Plus. Earlier, we heard the author, Representative Perez-Vega, speak to trying to combine these programs, VPK and School Readiness Plus, in the mold of VPK. So what we're trying to do overall with this amendment is shift the shape of that mold a little bit more in the direction of what the school readiness programs were providing. So with this eligibility issue, the amendment's going to strike the current and proposed changes for the VPK child eligibility and use instead the eligibility requirements from the School Readiness Plus program. And those criteria, in our view, are more succinct while holding true to the prioritization of VPK funding for children based on income or other at-risk factors, including children with disabilities, having an identified risk factor identified through the health and developmental screening process. The last thing that the amendment does is it preserves the current voluntary pre-kindergarten program seat allocation methodology. And this is something that the author spoke to directly. separating Minneapolis and St. Paul from their current bucket, their current one group of allocation for VPK into two distinct areas. What we want to do is preserve the current application process for school sites, including maintaining Minneapolis and St. Paul as one group, or bucket, as we like to call it, for allocating those limited VPK seats. And just to give you a little bit of background on that, the current law divides the capped 7,160 VPK seats funded through the biennium among 4 different groups or buckets, and those are Minneapolis-St. Paul currently. We're talking about splitting those up. The metro area, the non-metro area, greater Minnesota, and charter schools. The allocations to these groups are based on each group's share of the statewide enrollment in kindergarten students. Now, from our view, and we understand there's an argument about efficiency that was brought to bear in committee here regarding why we need to split up Minneapolis and St. Paul specifically, but that's going to be providing them with a unique benefit that apparently has value to them while not addressing the needs of other school districts in the state. In our view, there's no reason to give Minneapolis and St. Paul that special treatment to guarantee that those districts get a certain share of the state's VPK allocations when every other metro area school district must compete for those limited seats. And while every greater Minnesota school district has to compete for limited seats, and every charter school in that group has to compete for their share of limited seats. And just to give you an example of how this impacts a great many of our school districts here in Minnesota, Anoka-Hennepin is the largest school district in the state, and thus the largest school district in the metro school group, pretty big bucket, but they get no special treatment. They don't get to have their own allocation of VPK seats, and it's my understanding that they have, 4% of kindergartners, and yet I think only 2% of the VPK seats, so they're getting about half of what they would if they were to receive the same treatment that we're looking to give to Minneapolis and St. Paul. And that is what the amendment does, and I would urge a green vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Perez-Vega.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hudson, I just want to state note in regards to this amendment, because on February 29th, 2024, in our Children and Families Committee, and this was really shocking to me in that committee because you specifically on the record, and you and I may not see eye to eye on everything, but you actually supported the initiative of effect. I believe your words were that this was an example of efficiency and effective government, and I kind of want to thank you for that, because that really highlighted a grand momentum of saying, hey, we're moving here in a nonpartisan kind of way on this. And now it's just surprising about this amendment, because we had all this time in committee and you agreed on it, and I felt that was a very special moment. So I just want to take that back on saying, I'm not going to take it back. I'm going to continue to relive that moment in supporting of this great bill, and ask members to vote no. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to, I heard Representative Hudson's comments, there being potentially some concern that this Minneapolis-St. Paul split might somehow impact the rest of the state badly. And I just want to make sure we're clear, it's not like we've heard from any other districts about any desire to split in that way, in the way Minneapolis-St. Paul are. And the reason is because it really is unique to those particular districts. The way that they are combined right now is the challenge and complexity of making changes each year. So I will say that this change, Minneapolis-St. Paul, has, we've heard no concerns, no opposition from anywhere else in the state. It is in no way is it harmful or burdensome to any other part of the state regarding this change. This is just something that is unique to those districts. So I do want to assure everybody who may not represent those cities that in moving forward with this change, there's no way in which it might impact the rest of the state in any negative way. You can certainly vote this down and vote for the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Perez-Vega and Representative Pinto, Chair Pinto, for reminding us of the robust bipartisan conversations that we have in committee. And you're right. I did appreciate the fact that at face value, at root, what this change is looking to do is promote efficiency in the operation of the school districts and talking to one another and planning for VPK purposes. But as is often the case in our life experience, a first impression can be well informed by further study and expanding your point of view. And the point of the matter is that we do in fact have limited VPK spots. And the Anoka-Hennepin School District example makes it very clear that this does in fact have a dramatic impact upon the number of those spots that are allocated to school districts, whether or not they are counted as one unit, one bucket, or whether they're lumped in with an arbitrary category, geographical category that the legislature has determined. And this point, and we've heard it on more than one occasion in this chamber, of, well, nobody's coming to us asking for this, that, or the other thing. And boy, there sure are examples of that I wish we would apply rather than moving ahead with policies that nobody's asking for. But in this case, when somebody does come to us and ask us for something that's going to benefit them specifically, I think part of our responsibility as legislators who, despite our individual districts, have as our actual constituency the entire state of Minnesota, it's our responsibility to ask ourselves a question that the person who's coming to us might not be, because they have this narrow view of their interest. We're supposed to have a broader view of the entire state's interest. And so the idea that we're going to provide something that we're recognizing, again, in bipartisan fashion, as Representative Perez-Vega notes, is of benefit to Minneapolis and St. Paul, I think it is appropriate for us to ask ourselves, well, why are we exclusively providing that benefit to them? When we have a school district right next door that would benefit tremendously from this same type of treatment, but simply is not getting it. And what questions does that raise about the impact on other school districts around the state that, yes, indeed, may have resigned themselves to the status quo because they would never dream of being able to have the influence that the metro area does. Maybe we can get ahead of the problem and actually provide them with a solution through our own reconnaissance. I think that would be something to see. So I continue to encourage members to vote yes. I think this is a good amendment, and it makes the bill of greater utility to all Minnesotans, and I would urge members to vote yes. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Curran.
Curran votes no.
Curran votes no. Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 yeas and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail, and the motion is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4176.
Third reading. Discussion on the bill. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members will speak to it as it currently lies unamended. This bill 4176, what it does is it paves the way for the expansion of school-based programs, continuing to squeeze out our private providers who have suffered tremendously in recent years, especially our family-based and center-based child care and early learning programs. This bill is going to result in further decline in access to family child care providers and thus make child care less accessible, less affordable, and less portable. And to be fair, some of the proposed changes to the VPK program are welcome changes in transforming the program from a first-come, first-served enrollment program to one that is targeting limited resources, which we've had quite a bit of conversation about here today, to those children most in need and would potentially benefit the most from receiving the benefits. That is why we offered these amendments to better merge the positive aspects of School Readiness Plus into the VPK program. School-based programs like VPK should be limited and targeted to reduce their unfair competitive advantage over private early learning and child care providers. One aspect of the bill that needs further examination is the special treatment given to Minneapolis and St. Paul that we just discussed. Under current laws, those schools receive an allocation of VPK seats in proportion to their combined share of statewide kindergarten enrollment. This bill separates these two districts so that both Minneapolis and St. Paul would receive an allotment of VPK seats relative to their share of statewide kindergarten enrollment, presumably benefiting both of them. In contrast, again, hearkening back to a district like Anoka-Hennepin, the largest school district that we have in this state, they're going to continue to see their allocation divided with every other metro area school district. And again, Anoka-Hennepin has about 4% of the statewide share of kindergarten students, and they are currently allocated fewer than 2% of the total VPK seats. So this does matter. It does have an impact on the availability of VPK for local school districts. You also have to consider the continuing fiscal disparities in funding between school districts. Minneapolis has about 310 VPK pupils, and they generate more than $9,000 per pupil. Whereas Anoka-Hennepin has about 125 VPK pupils and only generates about $5,600 per pupil. Even though the kids have similar needs regarding household poverty or other risk factors, Minneapolis generates nearly $3,500 more per pupil to provide the same programming. And this, of course, is indicative of larger financial disparities in the funding formula for education that we continue to have conversations about, but just can't seem to rectify. We need funding that is fair not only for our schools, but also for our family-based and center-based providers. We need early learning and care programs that are grounded in the fundamentals of literacy for a lifetime of learning. We need local control where communities and parents, not bureaucrats or legislators, determine the programs and providers of choice. We need parents empowered to make decisions regarding the care and education of their children so that they are engaged in that care. Our goals should be clear. Funding that is fair and flexible, local control, parent empowerment, and literacy as learning. Unfortunately, this bill falls short of these key goals and focuses on putting bureaucrats before parents. So that is why I will be voting red and encourage members to do the same. Thank you.
Further discussion. The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. 10 years ago, I remember seeing the galleries full of in-home licensed daycare providers. And I still hear from them, and I was wondering why I don't hear from as many. And the fact is, in my part of the state, the huge drop over the years of daycare providers is tragic. I was hoping this bill would be able to take some amendments and make it less of a hit for greater Minnesota. Sadly, the amendments weren't taken, and I fear we're going to continue to have a decreasing supply of daycare providers in greater Minnesota because we're not addressing the broad problems. So unfortunately, I've got to vote no. I wish I could have voted yes, but you rejected really good amendments.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, here's an article from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. The article says half of Minnesota child care providers unsure how long they'll remain in business. Members, this bill pits the private sector child care providers, the ones that are leaving the industry, against government programs. This bill says, parents, we want you in our government programs. Members, the private sector child care providers cannot survive without the 3 to 4-year-olds. They simply cannot survive off of just infants and toddlers. And everywhere in our communities, it doesn't matter where you are, childcare is an issue. It is a major issue for families to find infant care, preschool care, and toddler care. In fact, I made a little tweet about it today, or a little post, I guess it's not tweets anymore. And this Yahoo says, killing for-profit childcare sounds pretty good to me. Let me say that again. Killing for-profit childcare sounds pretty good to me. That's disgusting. How many childcare providers do you know that are living high off the hog? I can't think of one. But what I do know is that this bill is detrimental to our private sector providers. Those providers are mainly women. Women whose businesses you will continue closing down. And then, when there are no private sector providers for the 3 to 4-year-olds, where are those infants and toddlers going to go? Because right now, we have a crisis on our hands. Mothers saying, well, I can't get an opening for 3 years, and planning childbearing around when childcare providers have openings. And if they happen to get pregnant before the next woman who is in line, who has that spot, creates a major problem. So members, I urge you to stand up for our child care providers, the private sector child care providers, and to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion? To the author of the bill, Representative Perez Vega.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of this body. I just am so greatly dedicated to our early educators, as our Children and Families Committee is. And I want to highlight that high-quality early childhood programs are essential for all of our youngest learners in this great state of Minnesota. And research shows that preschool not only gets children excited about learning and prepares them for kindergarten, but also builds their self-esteem, confidence, and critical skills in literacy, math, communication, and creativity. Even dual languages, as we're seeing in those volunteer pre-K. Even the access to music and creativity and learning about this wonderful indigenous land of Minnesota. And I also want to highlight the importance that our DFL majority has been able to recognize, even before this session started, on the importance of childcare. I want to thank Representative Carly and my colleague, because we have been addressing and speaking about that there's choices. There's opportunity, and that's what we're giving when we're talking about this legislation, that I look forward for folks to urge a vote yes on HF4176. And to my little preschooler that's watching with her preschool friends at home, I want to say muchas gracias, and shout out to all of our early educators, as well as the teachers that are in there, that are licensed and that are engaged and committed to our students, going from VPK all the way to K through 12th. I urge this body to vote green. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk call the names of the members voting remotely?
Kern. I'll call Swazinski.
You're on.
Swazinski, no.
Swazinski votes no. Kern. I would think so. Wait, see what she says.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 yeas and 61 nays, the bill is passed and it is titled agreed to.